It's time for the District 4 Report, presented to you by Professor Diggs himself, only on PilePointBearcats.com. Class begins now.
It is time for another District 4 3A report. I am the Professor Matt Diggs, and thank you for that wonderful lead-in. I'm just so grateful that this is not video or YouTube, because then you'd probably be seeing my dancing leading us into the District 4 3A report. Thank you last week for tuning in and giving me some very good positive feedback. I appreciate all feedback that I get on this, as it's something new. We were the #1 rated show for at least one day on the Pilot Point Bearcat Network. So that lets you know the power of this. For at least one day, we made it. But the District 4 3A report, let's talk about last week, we'll talk about this week, and we'll talk about the surrounding areas. Every Thursday at about 11 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., I release my points, my picks and point spreads at theoldcoach.com. So if you want to check out my point spreads for all of the games, including the games in District 4 3A, I will be releasing those. But last week in our district, I took Whitesboro by 22, and believe it or not, Whitesboro won by 22. So they were checking out my point spreads, and they wanted to match me up. So I appreciate that. But one where I didn't do very well was Paradise versus Brock. I took Brock to completely take out Paradise. I had Brock by 58, and Brock only ended up winning by 19. Bowie against Pilot Point, I had Pilot Point by 28. Pilot Point took the over. They won that game by 47. And then Ponder versus Peaster, I had Peaster by only 14, and they won by 29. So other than Whitesboro and Boyd, I misrepresented. I underachieved the top dogs in two cases, and on Brock, I overachieved them a little bit. And that Brock versus Paradise game was quite an interesting game. I dug a little bit into the stats on that. QB Tyler Moody for Brock, 8 for 16. And when you hear some of the other stats and some of the other quarterbacks, that's kind of a aberration. That's not a traditional stat line for Brock. Only a 50% completion rate. Obviously, the rushing game was strong. He rushed 11 times for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cutter Wilson, just a strong back for Brock. 15 carries, 103 yards, and a touchdown. Brock, Reed Watkins on the defensive side of the ball, 7.5 tackles and an interception. This was a very gritty game. It was only 28-13 at halftime with a 35-16 final. The second half was it was only a 7-3 kind of workmanlike possession sort of game in the second half. But for Paradise, what really stands out to me is their quarterback, Carter Stainton. 17 for 36. Again, not a good stat line. That kind of speaks to Brock's defense. 130 yards. He seems to pretty much do everything for Paradise. They will go as he goes, and as Paradise and Peaster will be battling for that 4th playoff spot in my take, and I'm sure a couple of teams will have something to say for that as well. It'll be interesting to see how he can lead his team to victory. Also rushed 11 times for 64 yards. For Paradise, Kobe Dickens had a great day. 15 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. So thank you to Max Preps and Brock for those stats. Brock uses a really cool program, like a digital scout sort of thing. So they had very good stats. So I appreciate our friends at Brock for that. Another game kind of digging into, and again, we're talking about quarterbacks, quarterback play being a really big indicator for how this district is going to go. Peaster has one of the better quarterbacks in the district, Gunnar McElroy, nominated for DFW Varsity Player of the Week, as he had 271 yards passing, 5 touchdowns throwing. He ran for a 6th touchdown. And then you had Tremar Gilbert, 11 carries, 77 yards, and 3 for 50 receptions with a touchdown. Ponder was interesting. They're very multiple. They have a lot of players. They don't have that big star, or at least the big star that has emerged through 6 weeks. Quarterback Clifton Cooper, good player. Also, he runs the ball, and you saw 3 players running the ball for Ponder. But that game, I think, was pretty much over at halftime. It was 40-19 halftime for Peaster. And as we got to the final, Peaster just continued to pull away in that game. And second half was a little bit of garbage time. But again, Gunnar McElroy is just I think when we're talking about that Peaster versus Paradise game, which in my view right now is for the 4th place spot, although both of them might jump Whitesboro, and Whitesboro might be that odd team out. But I think it's going to be with quarterback play. Who's going to lead their team? And right now, Gunnar McElroy is looking good. Carter Stainton also looking good. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. Moving down to Pilot Point. This was a game that we had some mop-up duty in the 4th quarter, as it was a 62-12 game at the end of the 3rd quarter. So even that 47-point margin doesn't really indicate how disparate these teams were. And again, just workmanlike work for everybody. The freshman Gage Anderson takes a lot of the grunt of the carries, 18 carries for 59 yards. Wyatt Smith, again, accuracy. When I'm looking at Pilot Point and Brock, 12 for 15, 289 yards, hit the big plays, 3 touchdowns. Aiden Cox, 6 receptions for 201 yards, 2 of those touchdowns. Ish Harris got back into the thing. I watched the highlight of his 1-yard touchdown run, and his spin move. This was he was stuck at the line, and then did an amazing spin move to get in. That really shows his talent. He had a pick 6. Pilot Point is finally showing us that they are getting back to that level and finally getting past their early season demons and getting some consistency. And finally, we had Whitesboro against Boyd. Whitesboro with a very workmanlike victory, the 22-point margin that I predicted. I've yet to find anything for Boyd online, so if you have Boyd information, Boyd names, Boyd players, I'm happy to give Boyd some love. But Whitesboro, again, Mac Harper, the quarterback for Whitesboro, I see a 21 for 27. That shows me very highly efficient. So that kind of gets back to what I was talking about with Brock and Paradise. Those 2 quarterbacks not as efficient as some of the other quarterbacks, at least in that game. And again, it's something we'll be keeping an eye on in our District 4 3A report. The quarterback report for these teams: Asher Contreras, 20 carries, 94 yards, and a touchdown, also receiving for the running back Contreras. And Jacob Hermes, 6 receptions, 84 yards, and 1 touchdown, as Whitesboro took care of business this week. So moving on to what will be happening this week. 4 big games. And the way I see this, as of right now, you've got 2 games where you have potentially playoff teams playing each other, and 2 games where the teams are not projected to make the playoffs, at least as of right now. And again, I know Peaster will have something to say about that, but I believe that there is a pretty big gap right now between 6 and 5, and subsequently, I think really there's only 5 teams that are going to be competitive for these 4 spots. And how that shakes out, we will have the last 4 weeks, last 4 to 5 games of district to let us know how that will end up shaking out. So this week we got Brock versus Whitesboro. I think Brock will be a heavy favorite, but it'll be interesting to see how they perform relative to last week. Is Paradise that good? Currently I have Whitesboro rated a little higher than Paradise, so this is going to be a calibration game. Theoretically, Paradise should be, or Whitesboro should have this closer than Brock, if that game was any indication of how this district is going to go. But to me, I think we're actually going to see one of those situations where Brock does more in that game, kind of a bounce back effect, but I don't know if that necessarily will indicate that Paradise would have a heads up over Whitesboro. But again, the quarterback play for Paradise when they play each other could have that, could share some insight into that. To that end, I think we'll get to see a little bit of that calibration because Pilot Point will take on Paradise. Now, this is a little bit of a trap game for our Bearcats because they have not really strung together consecutive good games so far. Even in their losses when they've played well, the next week it's you kind of wonder what's going to happen. So, can Pilot Point start to string together the kind of victories that is going to be needed for a potential playoff run? I think they will, but I think this game is going to be a little bit closer than people think. I think Paradise is going to make it a little bit closer than some. But if Pilot Point completely throttles Paradise, that will tell me that I think Pilot Point is back. Everybody says is Texas back, is Facebook back, and at least as of the taping of this, Facebook is back. And of the taping of this, we can say maybe Texas is back, but is Pilot Point back? And that'll be the question we will ask ourselves in this game. Peaster versus Bowie. I really like Peaster. I'm cheering for them on a personal level just because, they're Greyhounds. You gotta like the Greyhounds. Their mascot is a cute mascot. And that's not to diminish the other mascots in this district, but I'm a fan of Peaster, and I'm a fan of new programs. I'm a fan of Parker County programs, and I'd love to see Peaster make it to that next level. Obviously, they got to win games like this game. It's a one-score game either way. Can Peaster put together the pieces? And with that quarterback, I think they will. Bowie, at least as of what I'm seeing, lacks that explosive playmaker to distribute the ball. So I think Peaster is going to take care of Bowie this week. And then Ponder versus Boyd. This could be the only winning opportunities for these two teams. Boyd has yet to get a win. Ponder has had some wins, but hasn't had any district wins. I think Ponder will get their first district win this week. So my picks are Brock, Pilot Point, Peaster, and Ponder. And again, you can go to theoldcoach.com Thursday, and you can see what I think of the point spreads for those games. So let's look at the region, kind of the playoff picture, the big picture of 3A Division 1. And the one I really look at, obviously, District 3, that's where the by-district matchups will be. Everybody was off last week except for Wall. And still, for me, it's the Early versus Wall battle when they get to play each other that will really give us the insight into this district, because that will handle the 2-3. And when Pilot Point is playing Whitesboro, Paradise, Peaster, those are going to be those 2-3 games. So obviously that's going to give incentive for Pilot Point to get to that 2 seed and make things a little bit easier. But we're going to have two 5-0 teams playing in District 3 5A. It's for what many people think will be the district championship, Jim Ned versus Early. I think it will be Jim Ned, but how big? Because last time Jim Ned played, it was not the domination that we expected. And now Brock has had that game where it wasn't the domination that we expected from a defending state champ, or in Brock's case, a team that wants to become a state champion again and feels like that's what their pedigree is for this year. No real teams. You got Shallow Water. They're going to be being a heavily favored over Brownfield. We'll keep an eye on that. Denver City. Bushland is obviously a team that people in Brock are very familiar with, as they play quite a bit, it seems, and they are the team to beat in District 2. But I think regionally, those teams, Shallow Water and Bushland, are at the level of Pilot Point and at the level of Whitesboro, at least one score games either way on their basis. When you have turnovers and things to that end, those one-score games can get a little bit lopsided if you have a kickoff return or a pick six or something like that. Talent-wise, I think those are one-score games. So these are teams that we're keeping an eye on and of course, Early and Wall are right there as four teams that I think are very similar to Pilot Point as far as talent level. But I think Pilot Point, talent level-wise, has an opportunity to have a higher ceiling if they get it all together. But as of right now, we haven't seen Pilot Point really get it all together, and they've had some injuries. We're in a different world right now, trying out some new things, finding their identity. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on 3A at a regional level. But still, I think it's Brock versus Jim Ned. That game currently is slated to be the third round game. game, I think that'll be the regional championship. But that gives opportunity for another team to go 3-4 deep, even, and stay away from that Brock and Jim Ned juggernaut as they seem to be clashing for that round 3. If anything changes, we'll talk about it next week because every week things change and we'll update and calibrate as needed. But I've been Professor Diggs. Thank you for listening. If you have any complaints, if I messed up a person's name really bad, you can tweet me at Professor Diggs and I'll be happy to apologize and do better next week because that's all we can do is do better. But I'm Professor Diggs. Thank you for listening to the District 4-3A report. And I don't know if my Pilot Point friends are going to play me out on some music, but hopefully you enjoy the exit or the outro as we head back to the other quality shows that you might find on the Bearcat Network.